is a great night for Waterloo, New York. Not only can we be known as the birthplace of Memorial Day, now we can be known as the birthplace for the very first American Civil War memorial. Thank you. It can be here by the love and the families, neighbors, and friends of the 57 soldiers that we're about to recognize. I want to thank this community, the community as a whole, Pietro del Favreau and all of our friends, for giving our country another tool for education of patriotism. And I thank you very much.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the regiment or the unit that they came from, the person's name, where they died, and their age. And when I tell you where they died, if I say in hospital, they're one of the unfortunate ones that died of disease, many of them. And there was also one man who died here in Waterloo of disease after he was discharged because he was unable to complete his duties. From the 16th Regiment of New York Heavy Artillery, Private Edward Richards, who died in hospital at Fort Magruder, Virginia at the age of 19. From the 116th Regiment, New York Infantry, Brigadier General Edward P. Chapin, Port Hudson, Louisiana, age 31. 14th Regiment, New York Infantry, Private Andrew Jackson Henyon, Manassas, Virginia, age unknown. From the 22nd Cavalry, Private Thomas Condon, Andersonville Prison, Georgia, age 30. From the 100th Regiment, New York Infantry, Private John Martin, in hospital at Yorktown, Virginia, age 31. From the 76th Regiment, New York Infantry, Private Richard Gregory, Spotsylvania, Virginia, age 20. From the 8th New York Cavalry, Private Christopher Florestan, Washington, D.C., age 49. He died at the exploding of a cannon on the 4th of July. From Company K of the 1st Regiment, New York Veteran Cavalry, 3 men. Captain Robert Brett, Newtown, Virginia, age 35. Sergeant Mark D. Pulver, Winchester, Virginia, age 25. Sergeant Vinton F. Story, Beverly, Virginia, age 22. From Company C of the 33rd Regiment, New York Infantry, 16 men, all in the same company. Private Andrew L. Hermance, Fredericksburg, Virginia, age 42. Private George A. Langdon, in hospital at Camp Griffin, Virginia, age 23. Finally, the Women's Cenotaph. This is dedicated to all the women who served as spies or nurses or in disguise with the men in combat or any other way. It's also dedicated to all the grandmothers, the mothers, the wives, the sisters, and daughters who shed so many tears for their lost soldier. It was sculpted by 4 generations of one family, by Martha Buckley, the age of 96, her daughter Doris Wolfe, her granddaughter Terry Lynn Braun, and her great-granddaughters, who were 7 and 9, Rachel and Ainsley Braun. That concludes the reading of the names. Will the color guard please raise our flag?
God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet
Corporal Green, the orderly cried. Here, was the answer, loud and clear. from the lips of a soldier standing near. And here was the answer the next replied. Cyrus Drew. Then a silence fell. This time no answer followed the call. Only the rear man had seen him fall, killed or wounded, he could not tell. There they stood in the failing light, these men of battle, with grave dark looks, as plain to be read as open books, while slowly gathered the shades of night. The fern on the hillside was splashed with blood, and down in the corn where the poppies grew were redder stains than the poppies knew, and crimson dyed was the river's flood. Herbert Klein! At the call there came 2 stalwart soldiers into the line, bearing between them Herbert Klein, wounded and bleeding, to answer his name. Ezra Kerr! And a voice said, here! Hiram Kerr! But no man replied. They were brothers, these two. The sad wind sighed, and a shudder crept through the cornfield near. Ephraim Dean! Then a soldier spoke. Dean carried our regiment's colors, he said. Where our ensign was shot, I left him dead, just after the enemy wavered and broke. Close by the roadside his body lies. I paused for a moment and gave him a drink. He murmured his mother's name, I think, and death came with it and closed his eyes. 'Twas a victory, yes, but it cost us dear, for that company's roll, when called that night, of 100 men who went into the fight, numbered but 20 that answered here. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker for tonight, formerly of Waterloo, now living in Charlottesville, Virginia. He's an avid student of Civil War history, the author of several newspaper and magazine articles, and the man who literally wrote the book, They Marched on Richmond, about the 148th Regiment, one in which many Waterloo men served. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. George Shadman.
I would like to thank Karen Cleveland and the American Civil War Monument Committee for the invitation to speak. Are there any officers of the VFW and American Legion here? Well, there's a couple, and I appreciate that. Veterans, honoring veterans tonight, that's very good. I like that. As many of you are aware, there are many communities across the country that challenges Waterloo's right to the title of Birthplace and Memorial Day. Whether it's Center County, Pennsylvania, Richmond, Virginia, Columbus, Mississippi, Carbondale, Illinois, there are hosts of others. We know they are passionate about their claim. They loudly proclaim that they have proof that their locality placed flowers on the graves of the Civil War veterans or conducted services days, weeks, or months before May 5th, 1866. That may be true. However, I believe that there are several things that separates Waterloo from those other claims outside of the date, May 5th. First, and I guess the one that really matters, is because the President and the Congress of the United States said so. In 1966, both houses of Congress voted unanimously for the resolution, and President Johnson signed it. Now, unanimously tells me that all the representatives of all those other communities that are making the claims, after they saw the evidence, said yes, Waterloo is where it started. The second is that here in Waterloo, it wasn't a local garden club or a temperance society or the Masonic Lodge that decided to go out and put some flowers on the graves of a few local veterans. In Waterloo, it was a village-wide event with the businesses shutting down, with storefronts in the homes covered with black bunting. It was an event with businesses, schools, politicians, and the whole population participating. It was not just a social club's gathering. While others may have had an event in 1866. What separates Waterloo from the others is that Waterloo did it again in 1867, and they did it again in 1868, and thereafter. It was not a one-time happening, but an annual village-wide remembrance event. Another thing is the Grand Army of the Republic, the GAR. GAR was a national veterans organization, the first one to welcome into their ranks both enlisted and officers. Made up of the veterans of the Union armies, it became a powerful lobbying organization that fought Washington for what we call a GI Bill. Because of their efforts, pensions for disabled veterans and the widows of veterans and homes for orphans became a reality. Who knows what the VFW or American Legion would look like today if they didn't have the shoulders of the Civil War veterans to stand on. In 1868, the GAR National Commander, General John Logan, issued his now famous General Order Number 11, which is read on most Memorial Days across the country, proclaiming that henceforth, September 30th of each year would be Decoration Day. It was to be the responsibility of each GAR post to promote that day in every village across the country. It is written in the annals of the GAR that the inspiration for that National Day of Remembrance was the events the 2 previous years here in Waterloo, New York. And General Logan even titled Colonel John B. Murray the father of Decoration Day. The fifth thing that I believe separates Waterloo from the other claims is that it was organized with the participation of the Civil War veterans in mind. Colonel Murray witnessed something during his years of service with the 148th New York Volunteers. He saw people from all walks of life bond together into a camaraderie that bordered on an august obsession. He saw farm boys from South Seneca sharing blankets with merchants from Geneva, the sons of mill workers from Phelps donating money to send home the body of a lad from Tyre who had died of fever, and loggers from Penn Yan were sharing their canteen water with political wannabes from Seneca Falls. He saw callow boys who lied about their age to experience the excitement and the adventure of war turn into solemn, serious, determined men in a very short period of time. The war ended in April 1865. 3 months later, the 148th New York Volunteer Infantry took their last train ride as a regiment, arriving in Seneca Falls on July 4th. Just in time to march in the Independence Day Parade. I'm sure that another march was not on their things to do list for that day, but march they did with their heads held high and the famous 148 band leading the procession. Then they were discharged and they were sent home. Colonel Murray thought that that would be the end of the camaraderie that he had witnessed. But he was wrong. As 1865 turned from fall to winter, he saw those same men from vastly different backgrounds still together. They were seeking each other out. They longed for each other's company. You must realize that this was years before VA hospitals, a half a century before the term shell shock, and 100 years before post-traumatic stress syndrome had a name. It was long before psychiatry was a science. These men saw the most horrific scenes of war ever in the Western Hemisphere, then or now. And they had no support group. They had no one who understood but themselves. That peculiar bond continued. So when Colonel John B. Murray and local pharmacist Henry C. Wells got together in the fall of 1865 to begin planning an event to honor those men who were buried in Waterloo's 3 cemeteries, or those who were still lying cold beneath southern soil. Murray turned to those he most depended the year before, those he most trusted, his veterans, and they unhesitantly embraced the idea. It is written in the book, The History and Origins of Memorial Day in Waterloo, New York, quote, "As the veterans gathered to form their parade, they were once again comrades banded together to keep fresh memories of those who fell on the battlefield and those who had fallen since their last battle." It was not started by a social club. It was not an impromptu one-time event. It was an idea formed by a soldier who, with the consent of soldiers, paid tribute to their comrades, their brothers, in a way that only brothers could. That, my friends, is the fifth, and those are the things that separates Waterloo from all those others who challenge our claim. It's the soldier. And those soldiers that the veterans remembered on May 5th, 1866 are the very same soldiers we are honoring tonight. Those who perished on the many battlefields, died of diseases in the military hospital, or suffered a slow, painful, starving death in the stench and filth of a rebel prison camp. Those very same men, by name, by face, a comrade to the veteran of 1866, an unforgotten name of honor to us in 2008. Now, before I go and don my Civil War garb and participate with my comrades in the weekend's activities, I would like to thank the 1966 Waterloo Memorial Day Centennial Committee and the Waterloo Library and Historical Society for their work more than 40 years ago in getting Waterloo recognized as the birthplace of Memorial Day. And today to the 2008 American Civil War Memorial Committee for this wonderful monument to the boys in blue. I'm sure that the veterans of the 148th, the 126th, the 33rd New York, and all the others that have been mentioned here this evening are saying thank you. Waterloo, you've done it again. Thank you.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on and on and on. Amen.
Earlier I said we've developed a unique memorial. Part of that is the participation of the community in creating it. The committee hopes that the memorial these folks helped create is fulfilling that portion of General Logan's General Order Number 11 that George Shadman mentioned, issued on May 5th, 1868, exactly 2 years to the day after Waterloo's first commemoration on May 5th, 1866, which I will now read, a portion of it. It goes like this. Let no wanton foot tread rudely on such hallowed grounds. Let pleasant paths invite the coming and going of reverent visitors and fond mourners. Let no vandalism of avarice or neglect, no ravages of time, testify to the present or to coming generations that we have forgotten as a people the cost of a free republic. If other eyes grow dull, other hands slack, and other hearts cold, in the solemn trust, ours shall keep it well, as long as the light and warmth of life remain to us. Now to conclude our program, I'd like to introduce Chaplain Chuck Nightingale of American Legion Post 4035 and VF Post number 6433 to give us a benediction for the soldiers.
Lord, thank you for this beautiful evening. Lord of hosts, be with us yet, so that we do not forget the noble efforts of the past in war and peace to preserve democracy and maintain order and sustain humanity in ways of peace and social justice. We honor the men and women who have, with courage, sacrificed themselves on the battlefields of life, with compassion and concern for their fellow man. May our memorial to our fallen comrades be a living memorial of continuing effort. Tough to see up there. In the causes for which they died. Go with us as we part, and enable us by your gracious help to maintain in word and deed the principles by which we have pledged ourselves as Americans. May yours be the glory, and your children around the world be the grateful beneficiaries. May your great blessings be shed on us all, now and forevermore. Amen.
We thank all the participants in this evening's program, and we invite all of you to return tomorrow afternoon after the parade at approximately 2:45 for the dedication of the Star Stone and the North-South Cenotaph. Thank you all, and a good night.
Ladies and gentlemen, will you please stand for the raising of the colors? Hello, my name is Lieutenant Colonel Bill Knowlton, United States Air Force, retired, and I'm honored to welcome you today to the dedication ceremony of the American Civil War Memorial. I hope you will allow me to appear as a proud representative of three of my great-grandfathers who served in the Civil War: Moses Adam Knowlton of Essex, New York, a skipper on a vessel that served as part of the Union blockade of the South; Thomas Begley of Waterbury, Connecticut, a soldier in the 6th Connecticut; and Thomas Francis Witherby, a native of Port Henry in Essex County, New York, a musician with the 30th Pennsylvania Regimental Band who saw service as a medic during the horrific Battle of Gettysburg. I know you'll be pleased with the music that he played when Syracuse's Excelsior Coronet Band performs during the ceremony, and also at 4:30 this afternoon in Lafayette Park. The American Civil War Memorial that we dedicate today pays tribute to the great sacrifice by the citizens of Waterloo during the Civil War, and it also recognizes the soldiers from the North and the South who gave their lives in this tragic conflict. This tribute is specifically evident in the North-South Cenotaph that is constructed of stones sent to Waterloo for the 36 states that were in existence at the end of the Civil War. 57 men from Waterloo died in the Civil War, and extensive research is currently underway to write a short biography of each man. And we owe a debt of gratitude to Karen Cleveland, Dale Thetchke, David Calabro, Frank Varney, and Erin Byrne for doing this important research. There are already a number of these stories on the web at americancivilwar.com, along with photographs and descriptions of the American Civil War Memorial. I strongly recommend that you share this valuable information on this site with your family, friends, children, and great-grandchildren. Thank you for being here, and I know you'll share great memories of these activities today that you'll share for many years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to present to you now Pietro del Favreau, the designer and sculptor of our memorial. He's from Princeton Junction, New Jersey, and a graduate of Hobart and William Smith College, and he is very grateful for the opportunity to have sculpted this magnificent memorial. Pietro del Favreau.
Good afternoon, Waterloo. I'm going to start with a confession. You may remember in August it rained a lot, more than it usually rains in the Finger Lakes. And that's because we had a mud pile out here and we were trying to grow grass, and Karen and I prayed every day. And then in the last few days we've been praying for sun. So I think we've done pretty good. So thank you, Lord. What you see before you today could never have happened without the help of many fine people. So I must begin with a recognition of their great work. First, to the people of Waterloo who have come forward to carve cenotaphs, to incise stars, and to plant flowers. To Mayor Ted Young and the village trustees who have helped us all along the way. To Steve Ward and his fine folks at Public Works, who unloaded and moved our giant stones, and some of them weigh 2 tons, dug holes, and put up our red flagpole. And the photographs of them putting up this flagpole, it looks like Iwo Jima. You have to see the photographs. It was very magnificent. To Judy Young, who saved Waterloo's Civil War military record book from destruction. Without her, our effort to identify and write biographies of the Civil War fallen would have been nearly impossible. To Jason McCormick, our project engineer, for all his helpful suggestions and review of our drawings. To Assemblyman Brian Kolb for funding our stele, and to Senator Mike Nozzolio for his generous contributions. Goodbye, B. To Seneca Meadows for our sign, and this sign just went up yesterday. It's the most beautiful sign. Thank you. To the Phelps American Legion for our flagpole and 36-star flag. There are so many others, and you can find them all on our website and also in the program today. But I must also deeply thank the members of the American Civil War Memorial Committee. Our treasurer, Bonnie Hosford, Lou Van Cleef, who was always there to drive Karen and I in his convertible in the parades around town. Thank you, Lou. To Dave Dupre, who so patiently and professionally maintain our website with the million changes and edits I sent him, sometimes at 3 in the morning. You would probably wake up at 7 in the morning and wonder how I could be up so late, but I had to get that done. So thank you for all those edits. And be sure to look at the website that he's really created. It's AmericanCivilWarMemorial.com. It's in the book that you have today. To Doris Wolf, our wonderful publicity and media relations expert. And as a result of her work, there's an AP article that's going across America yesterday and today in all the newspapers of America. To Les King and Jim Hughes, who represented the town veterans in our early meetings and moved us in the right direction as we sought a place to build this memorial. To Bill Holmes, who showed me the graves of the Waterloo fallen when I first came to Waterloo, and has since put in endless hours of digging, planning, erecting scaffolds, drilling stone, and placing plaques. We really owe a lot to Bill. If you had seen this site 2 months ago, you would understand what he did. To Major Doug Daffler, who was always there with his Boy Scout comrades to help us. And finally, to the center of our project, Chairperson Karen Cleveland. Words cannot express my thanks for all she has done in keeping the project going, on schedule, on budget, and I think anyone who's running a town or running a state or a country knows that that's a miracle. So thank you. Let's give her a really big hand. Stand up, Karen, come on. Special thanks must also be given to all the military and reenactor units who have supported us. In particular to Dale Feeke and the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War, to Ave Botter and Reynolds Battery, to Kate Schweitz and the 148th New York Volunteer Infantry, to the Waterloo, the VFW, and American Legion, and to the 140th New York Volunteer Infantry, the 33rd Virginia, and the 1st U.S. Signal Corps. And you saw them last night, the Signal Corps with their torch poles, and today they were working with their flags. When I conceived the idea for this memorial, one of the most important things for me was to bring the spirit of the Waterloo fallen together in one place, and to make them present to us through short biographies of each man. These can now be found on our website, and there's several of them in the booklet you have today. They were the work of an extensive research project which involved Frank Varney, who was our keynote speaker today, and his students, and my student and assistant, Erin Byrne of Princeton. And she's right across from me here. Put your hand up, Erin. Erin's a senior at the Stewart School in Princeton. She made 2 journeys to the National Archives in Washington, D.C., to access and review the physical records of each of the Waterloo fallen. The research continues, and the biographies will be updated as information continues to come in. And I really encourage you to go to the website and read these stories. They are the courageous and heartbreaking stories of the broken lives of the Waterloo 57. This is the American Civil War Memorial. It remembers all the men and women of the Civil War, both North and South, brothers and sisters all. Over the past year, we have reached out to each of the 36 states of the Civil War and asked them to send a stone and a story. I am here to tell you good news. Our last stone arrived 2 weeks ago. Actually, I think it was a week ago. And I want to thank each sender of those stones. And I do want to recognize the person who's here today, one of our southern representatives from Alabama. Sally Page literally went out into a stream over a waterfall to retrieve the stone that you're going to see in the front of this monument. What's the name of that stream? Black Creek. And what's the town? Gadsden, Alabama. So thank you, Sally. And we're going to see all of them in a few moments when we unveil the cenotaph right here. I want to compliment our project mason, Bob Flad, and his crew for all their wonderful work on the memorial. But I want to especially thank Bob for coming here a month ago and working with us in a pouring rainstorm to build this cenotaph. There's a lot of committed people in the Finger Lakes, and I thank you all. The state stone stories are on our website. Each stone comes with a story. And they form, as you will see, compelling proof of the rich texture of memory that still exists across America today. I also want to recognize the man who sent us our first 2 stones, the Massachusetts and Iowa stones. Came at a time when we didn't know if we'd receive any stones. So it was very important to us. They were sent by my good friend, Colonel Pete Shaw of Hingham, Massachusetts. Pete was a sergeant in the 28th Infantry Regiment, 8th Infantry Division, one of the units engaged in the Battle of the Bulge. Later, his unit was involved in liberating a Nazi concentration camp. He has been actively involved throughout his life in the VFW and American Legion, including his VFW service as past Grand Commander, Grand Puptent of Massachusetts. And you sons here will be interested to know he's a member of the Sons of the Union Veterans of the Civil War. Pete is one of my great American heroes. Pete, you got to stand up. He's here today. And finally, very special thanks to my beautiful Italian wife, Maria, whose enduring love has brought me through the years I've devoted to this project. Thank you, Maria. The sacrifice and devastation that Americans endured during the Civil War are beyond our comprehension. They looked to many places for answers to the cyclone of violence that held the entire country in its grip from 1861 to 1865. There was a deep need to make sense of the continuous loss of loved ones, of comrades and friends who fell in a heartbreaking war of American against American. So they often looked to the sky to the night sky, to the stars and heavenly bodies, for comfort, for understanding of the imponderable mystery of it all. Our great American poet, Walt Whitman, wrote this: "I see before me now a traveling army halting, the numerous campfires scattered near and far, some away up on the mountain, the shadowy forms of men and horses looming, large-sized, flickering, and over all, the sky, far out of reach, studded, breaking out, the eternal stars." Here's how the United States House Chaplain, the Reverend Thomas H. Stockton, put it when he spoke at Gettysburg alongside Lincoln. "As the trees are not dead, though the foliage is gone, so our heroes are not dead, though their forms have fallen, and the spirit of their example is here. It fills the air, it fills our hearts, and long as time shall last, it will hover in the skies." And here Walt Whitman on Lincoln immediately after his assassination. You should all know that Walt Whitman was literally probably one of the greatest admirers of Lincoln. He would stand on the corner every day when Lincoln's carriage would go by and salute him. So when he was killed, he wrote his greatest poem. This is just a little bit of it. "When lilacs last in the doorway, in the dooryard bloomed, and the great star early drooped in the western sky, in the night I mourned, and yet shall mourn with the ever-returning spring." And finally, Whitman writing about the battlefield: "Look down, fair moon, and bathe this scene. Pour softly down night's nimbus floods on faces ghastly, swollen, purple, on the dead on their backs, with arms tossed wide. Pour down your unstinted nimbus, sacred moon." Perhaps tonight, when you look up in the southern sky and see the waning moon chasing Jupiter, you will see it as they did. Thank you.
Thank you, Pietro del Favreau, who is the designer and sculptor of this American Civil War Memorial. Now, if we could get this young lady away from the attention of our President Lincoln, Karen Cleveland, who is the chair of the American Civil War Memorial Committee. Karen Cleveland. Old Abe's got your ear, huh?
It's very hard to follow the sentimental words that Pietro had to share. It was those sentiments that he shared with us today that have made it possible for us to think so deeply of the crisis that our country was in. I was hoping that this memorial would then take the one next step. A step towards healing, a tool and memorial for all of the United States. It's hard these days with war and so on going on, but we are here today because of what happened between the years of 1861 and 1865. I'm not going to try to do more than that. Pietro has really put it into words for me. Thank you very much, and I hope he has for all of us. I thank everyone that has supported the project along the whole way, and we had days of many frustrations, but I got to tell you, more better days than not. So it's here. I'm excited, looking forward to the great dedication here. I'd like to call the committee up and forward here. We're going to, next in the program, as Pietro spoke of the stars in the heavens and all of the spirits of the soldiers and the tears of the loved ones as they look to the heavens. Our star stone, if you'd like to move forward, our star stone is to represent all of that sorrow. One star for every 1,000 soldiers, and I say soldiers, men or women, that died in service for our country during that tragic war. It's good to see the committee come together and take part in the unveiling here. If everyone's ready. We would now like to present to you the Star Stone, one of the great elements of the American part of this memorial. The American Civil War Committee welcomes the Star Stone to our monument. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen Cleveland. And now the Excelsior Coronet Band of Syracuse, playing in the style of the Civil War, God Save the South. The Excelsior Coronet Band of Syracuse. Ladies and gentlemen, General Robert E. Lee.
Hello, Waterloo. Why is this the heart of Yankee land? Anyway, if you weren't here last night for the candlelight ceremony, it was very moving. You were? Good. Well, these centigraphs here represented soldiers. But what they were, we are here to celebrate. We are here to observe. We are here to remember. But they were also one other thing. They were human beings. Imagine them standing there with their hats and their coats and their legs. They're human beings. We were not here just to celebrate what they did do, but what they couldn't do, because they never returned. They looked in 1861, 62, 63, both North and the South. They looked at their hometowns. They looked around, and this was the last sight they ever saw. They did not come back except in a box. They're buried in the ground. Many of the men of the Civil War were farmers. This was written on their applications for enlistment, what their occupations were. They were clerks. They were the bottom level of society. This was about to be the greatest moment of their lives, what they'd never seen, what they'd never done before. This, whether they came back or not, they were often remembered in years later when they passed away, if they 70, 80, 90 years old, was their life. And they never forgot their service for their countries in the United States Civil War. They're here today. We're to remember the memory. Memory, what is memory? It's to remember what they could not do. They did not marry, many of them. They did not have children, many of them. They did not return to their communities. They fought for their countries as they saw fit, and they did not return home. And we are there to remember the greatest deed of their lives. And we thank you for coming here today and remembering them. All the people of Waterloo, all the people from New York, all the people from the North, and especially all the people of the South. Thank you for coming, and God bless you all.
Thank you, General Robert E. Lee. The Excelsior Coronet Band will now play Yankee Doodle. The Excelsior Coronet Band of Syracuse and Yankee Doodle. Well, General Lee, General Grant expresses some equal time, so we will present General Ulysses S. Grant. General Grant, sir.
Mr. President, General Lee, Assemblymen, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be here to share and honor that which has so affected our lives. Before I begin, I will begin at the beginning for me. Waterloo is a place I've never had the pleasure of going through before. And consequently, I thought with some folks I hadn't ever met before, I'd tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in April 27th of 1822 to a farming family. My name was Hiram Ulysses Grant, the initials H-U-G. I don't recall that I like those initials very well. My father was a farmer, and I spent time farming and really enjoyed working with the horses. The biggest challenge I had was I hated the tannery business that our family was in. I went to West Point in 1839, and it was there through some clerical error that my name was changed to Ulysses S. Grant. And I liked the sound of it, so I decided to keep it. I wrote U.S. Grant on my luggage, and I was given a hard time by a number of individuals that called me Uncle Sam Grant, and that name Sam was a nickname that I carried. My future wife would call me that, and close friends would call me that for the rest of my days. I did fight in the Mexican-American War, and after that, being a commissioned officer in peacetime didn't suit me very well, so I resigned my commission, and I got married, and I tried my hand in business. And at one time, I sold cordwood, and had a difficult time of it so much so that I actually was selling cordwood for 50 cents a bundle before Christmas to get presents from my family. And I could not sell one bundle. It was a great financial hard time for me and a difficult time for economics at the time. I went on from that to get involved in real estate. The problem there was that I wasn't very good at collecting rent, and I rarely showed up at work. So the truth is that I really wasn't very good at business. I did try my father's business and made, actually the tannery business, and made $800, not a week, not a month, but $800 a year, and actually did fairly well on that until I was called and recommissioned by President Lincoln to participate in the Civil War. Now, as general of the forces of the Union Army who saw that war to its finish, I was not the president's first choice. The first choice of the president was a fellow West Point graduate who happens to be with us today. President Lincoln's first choice to lead the Union Army was none other than General Robert E. Lee. But he spent one day thinking about it, and it was proper at the time for men to fight and to live and to support the state which they lived in, and General Lee just informed the president that he could not work with the Union Army. And that is a change of decision made that made history that we are all affected by. My first attempts in the war were actually very educational for me, and I did have some great effort and some great support and some great maneuvers that provided with some great victories, including one of the greatest, which was at Vicksburg, which was a very significant, happening one day after the victory at Gettysburg, and considered a very big turning point for the war. I remember the first time that I actually came up against the commander of the Confederate Army, which was General Lee, and in a period of 1 month, I actually came up against him with my Union forces 3 times. And one must wonder what would have happened had General Lee accepted President Lincoln's request to lead the Army. He was a formidable opponent. Great losses were taken on the Union side as we went against smaller forces, and although we could replenish our supplies and our soldiers more readily, there were 3 battles whose outcome is still debated. And it would take another couple of years before I would see the general again. And those years were victorious for the Union Army. We did very well. And the final time I would see General Lee in the Civil War would be in Appomattox, as the Union Army had surrounded the Confederate Army, and the surrender terms were signed and agreed to. As I look around here at the passion of the individuals here, it was no less than the passion of those who sacrificed so much for this war. And the ceremony last night, it was an honor to be here and to honor these men and women. And it's something that I will never forget for the rest of my life. And I just want to say that the cost of freedom, as we have been made well aware, is great, but the value of freedom is priceless. Thank you.
Thank you, General Ulysses S. Grant. And now, Generals Lee and Generals Grant, would you please unveil the North-South Cenotaph? We will now have a wreath laying in front of the North-South Cenotaph. Janice Kinney, the president of the American Legion Auxiliary, Kathleen Storto, VFW Ladies Auxiliary, stepping forward and placing the wreaths. And now, a musket fire by the 148th New York Volunteers. Next will be Douglas McMillan, who is with the Gettysburg Blues and the Sons of Union Veterans. And he's going to read for you the introduction to the second inaugural of President Abraham Lincoln. Douglas McMillan.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters of the Allied Orders, I'm going to take you back for a moment in your mind to the years of the Civil War as I read this. Weeks of wet weather preceding Lincoln's second inaugural had caused Pennsylvania Avenue to become a sea of mud and standing water. Thousands of spectators stood in thick mud at the Capitol grounds to hear the president. As he stood on the east portico to take the executive oath, the completed Capitol dome over the president's head was a physical reminder of the resolve of his administration throughout the years of the Civil War. Chief Justice Salmon Chase administered the oath of office. In little more than a month, the president would be assassinated. As the president reads the address, take note of the beautiful use of the English language. This from a man with only 11 months of formal education. Notice, too, his frequent reference to God or an almighty being. This from a man who, it has been said, was a non-believer at best and an atheist at worst. Notice in his other writings and speeches how he refers to biblical terms and phrases. He was a truly great man for sticking to what he believed to be right, no matter what the price. Now, ladies and gentlemen, President Lincoln.
Thank you, Corporal McDougall. At this, the second appearing to take the oath of presidential office, there is less occasion for an extended address than there was at the first. Then, a statement somewhat in detail of the course to be pursued seemed fitting and proper. Now, at the expiration of 4 years, during which public declaration have been constantly called forth on every point and phase of the great contest which still absorbs the attention and engrosses the energies of the nation, little that is new could be presented. The progress of our arms, upon which all else depends, is as well known to the public as to myself, and it is, I trust, reasonably satisfactory and encouraging to all. With high hope for the future, no prediction in regard to it is ventured. On the occasion corresponding to this 4 years ago, all thoughts were anxiously directed to an impending civil war. All dreaded it. All sought to avert it. While the inaugural address was being delivered from this place, devoted altogether to saving the Union without war, urgent agents were in the city seeking to destroy it without war, seeking to dissolve the Union and divide the effects by negotiation. Both parties deprecated war, but one of them would make war rather than to let the nation survive. And one would accept war rather than to let it perish. And war came. 1/8 of the whole population were colored slaves, not distributed generally over the Union, but localized in the southern part of it. These slaves constituted a peculiar and powerful interest. All knew that this interest was somehow the cause of the war. To strengthen, perpetuate, and extend this interest was the object for which the insurgents would rend the Union even by war. While the government claimed no right to do more than to restrict the territorial enlargement of it. Neither party expected for the war the magnitude or the duration which it has already attained. Neither anticipated that the cause of the conflict might cease with or even before the conflict itself should cease. Each looked for an easier triumph and a result less fundamental and astounding. Both read the same Bible and prayed to the same God, and each invokes his aid against the other. It may seem strange that any men should dare ask a just God's assistance in wringing out their bread from the sweat of other men's faces. But let us judge not, that we be not judged. The prayers of both could not be answered. That of neither has been answered fully. The Almighty has his own purpose. Woe unto the world because of offenses, for it must needs be that offenses come. But woe to that man by whom the offenses cometh. If we shall suppose that American slavery is one of those offenses which, in the providence of God, must needs come, but which having continued through his appointed time, he now wills to remove, and he gives to both North and South this terrible war as the woe due to those by whom the offenses came. Shall we discern therein any departure from those divine attributes which the believers in a living God always ascribe to him? Fondly do we hope, fervently do we pray, that this nation, this mighty scourge of war, might speedily pass away. Yet, if God wills that it continue until all the wealth piled up by the bondsman's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, until every drop of blood drawn by the lash shall be paid for by another drawn by the sword. As we said 3,000 years ago, so still it must be said. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and orphan, to do all which may achieve a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. Thank you.
Thank you, President Lincoln, and also Dan Palmer for the banjo accompaniment on certainly the style of banjo that they heard during 1861 through 1865. We have next a visit with Assemblyman Brian Kolb, and we do want to thank him for the contribution of the stele piece of the memorial. Assemblyman Brian Kolb. Well, good afternoon, everyone. What a beautiful day. First, I'd like to share some words out of the program that was distributed today. The American Civil War Memorial remembers the 57 men of Waterloo who died in the Civil War between 1861 and 1865, and recognizes all the soldiers and sailors from the North and the South who gave their lives in the conflict. The war exacted a terrible toll on the nation. Pardon me. Carl Sandburg, in his biography of Lincoln, wrote these words: "The grinding drama of drums and blood and agony went on. The lines of boys in blue poured south and ever south. Fractions of them returning horizontal and groaning in ambulances. Others by thousands in shallow, rain-soaked graves, where hurried burying squads had shoveled them over. Still others by thousands, as at Shiloh, Malvern Hill, Gettysburg, with ribs and skulls picked clean and bare by scavenger birds, rain and sunlight finally giving them an ancient and inviolable dignity. 3 years of these rocking lines of destroyers seeking each other and unable to destroy it to an end. 3 years of it, and no foreteller had foretold it has happened." As we're here today in a wonderful ceremony, I visited Gettysburg just once, and it was amazing. I felt like the ghosts of Gettysburg. I was walking among them, the blue and the gray. It was an eerie feeling, but it definitely was hallowed ground. And today, as I was getting ready to go out the door of the house, I said, you know, what should I wear today to commemorate this important ceremony today? So I thought, aha, blue blazer, gray trousers, and the tie that binds. And for those that can't see my tie, it is fully decorated with the American flag. We're all Americans. And I think for us to live in the future, we can't forget our past. No matter how storied or how awful that past has been. A country came together after the Civil War, and since then, united we stand together. We've had difficult times over many years, ups and downs. We've had other conflicts that we've had to fight. But one thing that's always been is America has stand united amongst its people. And those brave soldiers and sailors back in the 1860s, regardless of what side they fought on, were fighting for the same very freedoms that we so enjoy today. My hat is definitely off to the committee here in Waterloo. I could think of no more fitting place than to have a memorial to the Civil War and the birthplace of Memorial Day here, right here in Waterloo, New York. So ladies and gentlemen, could you join me in again thanking the committee, all the volunteers, donors, and supporters to make this a reality. I guess in closing, it's at moments like this that makes me proud to be American, proud to be a citizen, proud to be an elected official. Abraham Lincoln, I think our greatest president, quite frankly, had the courage to make very tough stands. And there was no worry about being politically popular at that time. It was about what he felt was doing right for our country. Both armies, led by General Lee and General Grant, fought for what they believed was right for our country as well. Regardless of the differing view, they still were brave Americans. And I think a lot can be learned by our past, not just by the events, but the people that have served us in any form and fashion in the history of our country. So with this moment, I hopefully, as you go home today and go back to the rest of our lives that we so enjoy, and this beautiful
region that we live in, pay homage to those that came before us. Pay homage to those that made the sacrifices, whether it was with their lives or with their families, with their holdings, whatever their sacrifice was. Just pause and celebrate those sacrifices and for what benefit we now have today in the great country we live in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Assemblyman. We are grateful today to have with us, with a dedication message, Senator Mike Nozzolio. And we are grateful, too, for the great, generous financial support of State Senator Michael Nozzolio, and are honored to have him with us today. Senator Nozzolio.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I, too, am very proud to be here to stand before all of you to dedicate this beautiful memorial that my colleague and friend, partner in representing Seneca County in the New York State Legislature, Brian Kolb, articulated many of the important thoughts today. I'd like to add my congratulations and gratitude to Karen Cleveland and to the members of the committee for making this memorial a beautiful one, a lasting tribute, and one that we all are very proud of. And thank you. Also, I wish to give one of my good friends, and I'm singling her out because she continually advises me on what I should do, what I need to do, what she hopes I will do, and what she needs me to do. And I'm sure you probably guessed already who I'm talking about. Let's give a round of applause to Doris Wolf. Doris, thank you very, very much for all you do. Just a brief correction that there was no generosity in my part in terms of what I did to help make this happen. It was our tax money that I've been able to work hard to chisel out and ensure that those who make decisions in Albany don't forget. Don't forget what happened here at Waterloo, New York. Don't forget that this area of the state needs attention. And don't forget that we are doing things here that without a lot of government support, without a lot of bureaucracy, with tremendous volunteers. And that's really what it's my job to keep reminding those in Albany who have to make decisions, who are part of the state government, that that's what we have here. It was just a few weeks ago that I proudly stood with Assemblyman Kolb and over 700 veterans from across the region and the nation, all who were connected in one way or another to the huge endeavors that took place at Sampson State Park, less than 13 miles south of here. The Waterloo Color Guard, the American Legion Color Guard was there. Many of the color guards from across our region were there to consecrate and dedicate what will be the Sampson Veterans Cemetery. This cemetery is on hallowed ground, literally hallowed ground, where 750,000 sailors and airmen trained in preparation for every war that America was confronted with between World War II and the current conflict in Iraq. That those who trained there, those who were part of first the naval operations and then the Air Force operations, many of whom trained there, prepared for battle, and never returned to America because they lost their lives in defending our freedom. That's where a world-class, first-class veteran cemetery will be housed, on that hallowed ground, 100 acres, half the size of Arlington National Cemetery, where any veteran of the United States military, the 5 branches of service, and their spouses will be eligible for internment there. I had to fight long and hard to get this land transferred to establish the cemetery. I had to fight long and hard to get $1 million, and Assemblyman Kolb worked very hard with me to get the land transferred and to get those funds. We have $1 million now earmarked to establish that cemetery, and it will be there for all veterans, and we hope all veterans of this generation and all succeeding generations. I mention this today in the spirit of what you have all brought to us with the dedication of this Civil War monument. Because Waterloo, more than any community in this region, any community in this state, any community in the United States of America, Waterloo takes its responsibilities as the birthplace of Memorial Day very, very seriously. With the Waterloo Museum, with the celebration and commemoration of Memorial Day on the traditional Memorial Day. What better place to have a Civil War monument dedicated, because that was the symbol of the turning point of our nation. The seminal series of battles that decided the history of our nation, the fate of our nation. But Waterloo certainly, as right after that war, established Memorial Day as a fitting tribute to those who suffered and died to keep America free. What better place than in the shadow of the birthplace of Memorial Day than to have a veterans cemetery dedicated to those who served us in the United States military. So I thank you very, very much for your support of this wonderful monument, for your continued interest and hopeful support. In the last, since we dedicated the cemetery, and we just simply did it with a very beautiful ceremony, we have raised over $30,000 of private donations that have supported what we will be doing at that cemetery, which is to establish a number of memorials there and connect them all to Waterloo, a place that we hope people will come to, and from all across America, as they do at Arlington National Cemetery. We hope they come here to Waterloo, the birthplace of Memorial Day, and the Sampson Veterans Cemetery, because that's a place where true heroes are honored. I'm honored to be with you, and thank you very, very much for what you have done here today.
Senator Mike Nozzolio, who did our dedication message. We have a special keynote speaker today, a native of New Jersey. His name is Dr. Frank Varney. He has his PhD from Cornell, which he just earned in 2007, and it's about a Civil War subject. The thesis is The Men Grant Didn't Trust, Memoir, Memory, and the American Civil War, and it will be available for publication in the not-too-distant future. Currently, Dr. Varney is on the faculty of Dickinson State University in North Dakota, where he specializes in U.S. history and, of course, the Civil War. He has 5 Civil War ancestors. One was involved in the defense of Washington, and another was in the Army of the Potomac for the entire war, 1860 to 1865, and was present at the surrender of General Lee to General Grant at Appomattox. He's going to talk to us today on a subject that we all can learn from, how much we owe to the veterans of the Civil War. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Frank Varney.
In a few months, when we go to the polls to decide who the president will be, we will be making the same decision this nation made 148 years ago. But in our case, we won't get up the next morning and look at newspaper headlines that say the Union is dissolved. But that is what happened in 1860. And the men of Waterloo and other places all over the United States had a great decision to make. These men saw those headlines, and they went to war to preserve the nation that they loved. Other men in other states went to war to preserve their very different view of what sort of nation the United States should be. And men in the South went to war to resist what they saw as the oppression of a foreign power and the encroachment of the federal government on personal liberties. We may regret that they felt it necessary to make that choice, but we must salute their bravery, their commitment, and their fortitude, as well as that of the men of the North. This monument recognizes the courage of the men, North and South, who are willing to fight, even to die, in defense of their vision of America. And when the war had ended, they bound up the nation's wounds and forged the great country we enjoy today. The Civil War was the most momentous event in the nation's history. A higher percentage of the population served than the armed forces than have served in any other war in U.S. history. More men died in it than all of our other conflicts put together. At the Battle of Shiloh in April 1862, more men died in 3 days than all of America's previous wars put together. The Battle of Antietam, fought in September of 1862, was the bloodiest single day in American history. Mathematicians have calculated that on the average, there was one casualty every 8 seconds for 11 hours. In the Battle of Gettysburg, fought in the first 3 days of July 1863, more Americans died than in 12 years of the Vietnam conflict. And they were all Americans, and we mourn every one of them. It is too easy for those who have never known war to view it as exciting and glorious. In the words of William Tecumseh Sherman, though, we know that war is all hell. Kent Graham, wonderful writer, eloquently reminds us that war is really a series of personal tragedies, as families learn that their sons, their husbands, their brothers will never be coming home. There is one great truth to war: young men die. The men who left Waterloo and towns like it, north and south, went to war without knowing what to expect. Many of them had never been more than a few miles from home before they began the greatest, and for many of them, the last adventure of their lives. But they went, and they went willingly. Nor are they the only ones we should remember. They enlisted in the Army at a time when there was no social service network for their families. The wives, the children, and the parents, many of them left behind, made their own sacrifices, fought their own war for survival. They struggled to make their way in an unfamiliar world without the support of the men upon whom they relied, and they too made that sacrifice willingly. President Lincoln, in his dedication of the National Cemetery at Gettysburg, spoke of the need to remember the men who had given what he called the last full measure of devotion. He said, "It is fitting and proper that we do this," and so it was. And so it is for us as we dedicate this beautiful monument here in this town, which has a long and proud history of remembering the deeds and sacrifices of those to whom we owe so much. At the dedication of the 20th Maine Memorial on Little Round Top at Gettysburg Battlefield, one of the speakers was Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. In his long and storied life, he had many accomplishments of which he was justifiably proud. He was president of Bowdoin College, governor of Maine, winner of the Congressional Medal of Honor, and author of 2 outstanding books on the Civil War. But he was most proud of the fact that he had been the commander of the 20th Maine. At that dedication, he said something that should resonate with us all. In great deeds, something abides. On great fields, something stays. Forms change and pass. Bodies disappear, but spirits linger to consecrate ground for the vision place of the soul. And present men and women from afar, and generations that know us not, and that we know not of, shall come here to ponder and to dream, and the power of the vision shall pass into their souls. What more fitting occasion than this to remember these words? And we should remember the words of another great orator as well. In President Lincoln's wonderful Gettysburg Address, he reminded us that these men gave their lives so that a nation of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. And that is exactly what was at stake. It is easy for us to forget that when the Civil War was fought, representative democracy was still an experiment, and that much of the world expected it to fail. If it did fail, then the last best hope of Earth would fail with it. These men left their homes and sacrificed to ensure that it would not fail. We take for granted our comfortable lives, our secure futures, and the rights that these men paid so heavily to protect. They willingly entered into a life of eating bad food, sleeping on the ground in all weather conditions, experiencing crushing boredom and unimaginable terror. They saw things no human being should have to see. They endured things no human being should have to endure. They saw their friends die. They held them when they died, and they died in turn. Some died of disease, feeling their lives slipping away inch by terrifying inch. Others died suddenly in battle without time to prepare themselves for death. Some of them lingered for weeks in pain and fear, and they died for us. During my research, I have read dozens of journals and hundreds of letters, and the same theme recurs. They sacrificed their comfort and ultimately their lives so the future of the nation would be made safe. Ladies and gentlemen, we are that future. We represent the hopes and dreams they had for America. We cannot afford to forget what they did. Not just the heroes we honor today, but all those who took part in the great crusade to preserve the Union. Every man who put on a uniform to take up the cause of union and of freedom, or of state rights, is now dead. They lie in national cemeteries, in quiet churchyards, or in forgotten and unmarked graves. But they all gave so much for our sake. And although we gained so much from their sacrifice, think of all we lost as well. The songs they would never compose, the books they would never write, the children they would never father. Instead, they gave birth to what President Lincoln called a new birth of freedom. At Gettysburg, the president called on the nation to make certain that these honored dead shall not have died in vain. Note that he did not say, have not died in vain. He understood that the danger was not past, and that if the nation failed, then their sacrifice would have been wasted. The struggle to preserve the great goals and noble ideals that they died to save did not end with their deaths. It continued, and it continues to this day. It falls to us, and someday it will fall to our children, as it always falls to the sons and daughters of the nation, to ensure that we are worthy of the sacrifice they made. We must strive always to deserve what they gave us and what they give us still. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Frank Barney. Our benediction will be given by a Civil War chaplain who was chaplain with the New York Volunteers, Chaplain Philos Cook.
Thank you, sir. Let us pray. We thank thee, Lord of our lives, for the rich heritage of this good land. We thank thee for the evidences of thy favor in the past. We thank thee for the hand that made and preserved us as a nation. We thank thee for those who by blood and sweat, by toil and tears, forged on the anvil of their own sacrifice all that we hold dear. May we never lightly esteem what they obtained at a great price. May we be grateful for our rights and our privileges. May we be conscious of our duties and our obligations. We ask this in the name of him who died for all men, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Chaplain Philos Cook of the New York Volunteers. Our ceremony concludes with a small, not a small, but a meaningful concert by the Excelsior Coronet Band. They will do a medley of Tenting Tonight for the Civil War and taps. The Excelsior Coronet Band from Syracuse.